Chapter 9. Look before you leap. I woke to the sun beaming on my face. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. I had been staying with Rapunzel, Eugene, Lance, and Cassandra for 2 weeks. Hookfoot was there, but he left to be with his brother, Hook Hand. Rapunzel noticed I was awake and smiled as she closed her journal. "Morning," she sang. I groaned, falling back onto my pillow. "Is it morning already?" "Yep," Cassandra started. "Up and at 'em," she continued, pulling the blanket off me. "Can't we just put the sun away for 1 more hour?" I said, sitting up. Rapunzel laughed. "Not today." She looked at me. "Hey, why don't we go exploring? You've been with us for 2 weeks and we haven't spent any time together." I rubbed my arm. I wasn't trying to avoid them. I was just trying to avoid talking to them. "No thanks," I laughed. "Piper," Rapunzel sighed. "Just 1 day?" I rolled my eyes. "I've just been tired. I'll let you know when I'm ready." Cassandra sighed. "Hey, Raps, I think Eugene is calling you," she said. Rapunzel looked to the door. "I didn't hear anything," she shrugged, looking back at me. I laid on my back. "I heard it." Cassandra laughed, knowing I was lying. Rapunzel raised an eyebrow. "All right then, I'll go see what's up." She gave a reluctant sigh and walked out. Cassandra pulled a chair in front of her, sitting in it backwards. "I know what 'I'm just tired' means," she said, using air quotes. "That I'm tired?" I sighed, rolling back over to face her. She shook her head. "You're anxious." "Why would I be anxious?" I asked, sitting up. Cassandra chuckled. "Because you know Raps," she stated. "You know she'll ask you how you are, she'll ask if you're all right, she'll ask what you want, even what you need, and you're scared to just tell her." I blinked. "That's not entirely it," I sighed, hugging my knees. "When'd you get so philosophical?" I laughed. Cassandra chuckled as well. "I've had to deal with Raps for 2 years now. I've had to deal with how are yous I don't want to answer and are you okays that I lied about more times than I can count," she said simply. "Why?" I asked. "Rapunzel is your best friend. You should be able to talk to her. I'm just some kid who helped my friend try to kill her. I don't even know why she keeps me around," I laughed. Cassandra shook her head. "Because she cares. It's sometimes a little too much, and that's something she needs to figure out on her own. And if I say I'm feeling down, she'll pamper me for a week." She laughed. "Not that I don't appreciate it, it's just tiring." I sighed. "I am tired. I don't want to be out here. I want to go home, but everyone hates me there. Lance hardly trusts me. Eugene thinks I'm some dumb kid who can't handle herself. And Rapunzel wants me to be glad about everything all the time. Even that bee that stung me yesterday." I flopped back onto my pillow. "I am tired, but just emotionally." Cassandra leaned back. "And there we are. Admitting it is the first step to fixing your problem." I sat up and put my pillow on my face, groaning. "Fine, I'll hang out with Rapunzel. Just stop pretending to be a therapist." Cassandra laughed. "That wasn't my goal," she started, "but I'm sure she'd appreciate it." Rapunzel walked back in, holding a flower. "Well, Eugene wasn't calling me, but I found this beautiful flower." She handed it to me. "It's called a Cosmos Pied Piper," she smiled. The petals were shaped like tubes, and they were a light pink with a bright yellow center. "Thank you," I muttered. "We're gonna need to go into town soon," Rapunzel said, standing up. "We're running low on food, and I've had the strangest craving for eggs lately," she said, shrugging. I perked up. "I make really good omelets," I blurted out. "You do?" Rapunzel turned around, smiling. I blushed. "At least, I think they're good." Cassandra blinked. "I didn't know you liked to cook," she said with a smirk. "Yeah," I started. "Making stuff is relaxing for me. Foods, crafts, treasonous science experiments," I joked. I wasn't sure if they'd think it was funny, but Cassandra burst into laughter, and I blushed. My omelets. Do you guys like spicy stuff?" I asked, rubbing my neck. "I don't think Eugene does," Cassandra started, "but the rest of us do," she smiled. I looked at the dress Rapunzel had bought me in the last town. I was still wearing my dress from when I worked as a maid, though it was worn, torn, and beaten to bits. I picked the dress up. "I'll go out to find Peppers then." Rapunzel placed a hand on her hips with a smug smile. I guess we found your soft spot, Ms. Wilson, she chuckled. Why don't we find the Pipers together? Bonding time, she sang. I laughed anxiously. All right then. I stepped behind the curtain that was hanging in the corner of the girls' side of the caravan room and finally changed into some clean clothes. I felt refreshed. I stepped out and Rapunzel clapped in excitement. Oh, you look so cute, she smiled. I chuckled uncomfortably as we walked out the door. Let's go, I said. Look at you, Eugene said. Finally getting some air, he joked. I nodded, but I didn't appreciate the congrats. I was just doing things as I felt comfortable. Rapunzel opened her journal. Eugene, have you seen any bird's-eye chilies around? They're supposed to grow around here. Eugene pointed into the woods. I saw some little red ones that way. I hope you're not planning on pranking me again. Rapunzel rolled her eyes. Oh, Eugene, you didn't even need milk. Yeah, I needed an infirmary, he yelled in anger. Rapunzel chuckled. Well, Piper and I will just be in the woods if you need us. Don't die, Eugene called out behind us, and Rapunzel laughed. Rapunzel leaned down to a bush looking for peppers. You see anything? I shook my head. I then looked further into the woods. Running water, I exclaimed. We can restock on fresh water. Great idea, Piper, Rapunzel smiled, grabbing my wrist and pulling me toward the river. When we arrived, Rapunzel pulled out a frying pan. What are we going to use that for? I asked. To carry the water, she said, putting the pan in the water. She then gave me a mischievous smirk. Do you know how to swim? She asked suspiciously. Kind of, I shrugged, sitting next to the river. Rapunzel stood up and started walking away, then quickly turned around and jumped into the water. Woohoo! She shouted. Get in, the water's nice and warm, she giggled, splashing me. Your dress! I exclaimed. No, wait, I'm not swim ready. Come on, Piper, Rapunzel prodded. You gotta be impulsive sometimes. I pulled my feet away from the water so she couldn't grab them. No, I don't. Rapunzel sighed. Piper, if you never let anything happen, nothing will ever happen. Good! I shouted. I don't want anything to happen to me. She reached out of the water from my boot, and I pulled back. Stop! I groaned. Rapunzel sighed and started backstroking. Fine, stay hot. I will, I snapped. The air was dry, though. Rapunzel's temptation got to me. Fine, I groaned, taking off my boots. Rapunzel smiled. Yay! Phew, here we go. I fueled myself up. I ran toward the river, stopping before I leaped. Rapunzel cheered. Come on, Piper, you got this, she laughed. I ran down the hill, tripping instead of leaping, and I held my breath as I fell into the water, encased in cold water. It was odd. I rose to the surface and took a gulp of air, then looked to Rapunzel and she laughed. Doesn't that feel great? Rapunzel asked. I guess, I chuckled. We need to get going, I sighed. Rapunzel raised an eyebrow. Don't you want to swim for a while? I shook my head. If we swim too long, it'll get dark before we dry. I looked at Rapunzel as she pulled her hair to the front. Before I dry. It'll be a week before your hair dries no matter what, I laughed, climbing out of the water. Okay then, she sighed. Was it nice to do something on a whim? Rapunzel tilted her head. I shrugged. I guess we should probably do less careless things on a whim next time. I lifted my brand new dress, now soaking wet. Rapunzel nodded. We can only hope, she chuckled mischievously. As Rapunzel began to tie her hair up, I spotted a bush speckled with bright red peppers. The peppers! I laughed, wringing out my socks. I ran to the bush and picked them. Behind me, I heard Rapunzel chuckling. Piper picked a peck of peppers. I burst into laughter. I was actually named after that poem. Rapunzel gasped. Your laugh sounds like a duckling with the hiccups, she smiled. I blushed and looked back to the bush. Rapunzel coughed. Sorry. I shrugged. It's fine. Varian said something similar when he first heard me laugh. Similar? She questioned. What'd he say, if you don't mind repeating? He said I sounded like a... I chuckled softly at memory. Like a hiccuping hog. Rapunzel cupped her mouth. Piper, she chuckled. You're allowed to laugh, I sighed. She shook her head. That's not that funny. It was funnier than the joke that made me laugh in the first place. I shoved the peppers into my skirt pockets, the joke being an experiment blowing up in his face. Rapunzel snorted. Your first time seeing that? I've heard it happens a lot. It does, it did, I sighed. I laughed every time it happened. Rapunzel placed a hand on my shoulder. I promise, as soon as we're back in Crona, we'll make sure Varian is okay. Thanks, Rapunzel, I smiled. For everything. And I'm sorry for everything. Well, you have plenty of time to grow. And you already have so much. She pulled me in for a hug. My eyes widened. I hugged her back. I'll do my best. Thank you, again. Rapunzel pulled away and pulled me back to our campground. Hey, girls, Cassandra smiled at us. And why are you soaked? I spun around, placing the peppers in a basket. We jumped into a river. Why on earth would you do that? Lance laughed. Because it was fun, Rapunzel stated simply. Eugene rolled his eyes. That's my girlfriend. He shook his head as he built the fire for this evening. Did you get those peppers? He stood up. I gestured to the basket of peppers. We can go into town later and get the rest of the ingredients. Cassandra walked up to me and patted my back. Welcome to the gang, kid. Don't call me that. I walked into the caravan to get a towel, sighing to myself. Everything will be okay. End chapter 9.